Welcome to this revision video on delegated legislation focusing on bylaws. In the video on orders in council, we consider the types of question you might be asked in the exam. This is a typical question that you would be asked first of all about delegated legislation. Outline what is meant by statutory instruments and bylaws. As you can see, this is worth 10 marks, so each part is worth approximately 5 marks. However, if you asked a 10-mark question on bylaws, I would add the 2 additional examples at the end of the video. The first thing to note about delegated legislation is that you need to be completely clear about the difference between primary legislation, shown at the top here, which are acts made by Parliament, and the delegated legislation, which is bylaws made by local councils and public companies, orders in council made by the Privy Council, and statutory instruments made by government ministers. All of these laws on the lower tier are secondary legislation and can only be made under the authority of an enabling or parent act passed by Parliament as primary legislation. The key to a good answer is to define the type of delegated legislation, make sure that you are clear that it's made under the authority of an enabling or parent act and can't exist without that authority, and that you give examples. This video focuses on bylaws and what to include in your answer. So you would start with a definition. Bylaws are laws made by local councils and public bodies who have been delegated lawmaking power by Parliament under a parent or enabling act. There are 3 additional things that you must say about bylaws. They are made under delegated powers given by parent acts such as the Local Government Act 1972. They must be approved by a government minister, and they are enforceable in court. Then you need to give 2 examples. Make sure you give 1 example of a bylaw made by a local council and 1 by a public body. The dog fouling example is a bylaw made by the council. So you need to say that these sorts of bylaws made by local councils deal with matters which affect their local area. So local councils can fine people who let their dogs foul in public places without clearing it up. These bylaws are called dog control orders, and they are made under the Clean Neighbourhoods and Environment Act 2005, which is the parent act. The second example should be about public bodies. So they make bylaws to deal with matters affecting their property. Train companies are an example of a public body who can make bylaws. And they make bylaws imposing fines for people who don't pay their fare, and they do this under the Railways Act 1993, which is the parent act. So now you've given 1 example of each, you would have plenty to get you 5 marks. But if you are answering a 10-mark question, I would add these 2 additional examples. Firstly, the example of a local council banning drinking in the town centre. And we know that Luton Borough Council has made bylaws designating various parts of the town centre alcohol-free, and they have made those bylaws under the Criminal Justice and Police Act 2001, which is the parent act. And a further example of a public body making bylaws is the National Trust. And we talked about the National Trust owning properties, and they can make bylaws about those properties. So they can make bylaws relating to preventing people camping or littering, and they do this under the National Trust Act 1907, which is the parent act. The final thing to do is to review your notes and then try and write an answer describing bylaws in either 5 or 10 minutes.